How's this sound? How does this sound? All right? Can you hear me? I'm going to try and meet pretty much on time, and I want to thank everybody for coming. There's a few more people getting settled in. This has really been an amazing journey, and I really want to appreciate everybody who's come out tonight to help us really get on the right path to finding solutions to address homelessness. Oh, I guess I should. My name is Kristen Schrader. Thank you. You know, when I see other people talk and start, without introductions, like, why don't they introduce themselves? Okay, now I know how hard it is sometimes. Again, I want to thank you all. It's really been an amazing journey, and we have so much work to do, and I know in our community we can do it. And this just is an example of how much we care about the most vulnerable and the underserved in our community, and the need for us to find solutions. I began this journey, I don't know, a little over a year ago, and I really picked it up again in January and February. And I looked at other communities to see, what are they doing? How are they making a difference in their community? And what are some of the key components that need to be in place in communities? And a couple of things came to mind, and that is we need a good foundation of data, and we need a good foundation of a collaboration. And the federal government actually has some good ideas about that, and there are mandates that are required, communities are required to undertake in order to get HUD money, Housing and Urban Development money. And so so that's the first thing we took a look at. And I looked around, and one of the consultants that we hired has, both of the consultants we hired have experience already in Shasta County. They've been advising and mentors to our county already. They also have extensive background in working with communities all over the country in addressing homelessness and the key components that we need to put in place in our community. They actually came up and did a workshop with us in July, which had really great results. So I'll get a couple of housekeeping notes too, and then we'll talk a few more minutes, and then I want to have a couple of people come up and speak, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nika and Eli, and they'll give you a PowerPoint. I want to make sure that there's 3 documents in the back of the room when we first walked in that they'd like you to have. We're going to do questions and answers are going to be generated with 3x5 cards, and if you raise your hand, our volunteers will pick up the 3x5 cards. We'll have a short question and answer at the back, at the end. Also, it's being filmed by the Shasta County Arts Council, and the schedule for production is on, broadcast is on the half sheets that are in the back of the room, and the beginning and the outside of the foyer. Also, the reports that we contracted to have done are available online at the United Way, and that information is on the PowerPoint, but it's also on a half sheet of paper. So those reports are available to download on your smartphone right now, if you'd like, or on your device. But the most important thing is being here. It's having the knowledge that there's many other people just like us in our community that want to make a difference. And so I think you'll see, we were really inspired at the July workshop that Nika and Ashley at the time helped put on. And we could see the energy, we could see the interest in our community with just 60 people in the room who wanted to find out what is our next step, what can we do to help this issue. So I'll want to just thank you again. I want to actually I have to do a couple more thank yous. This is being undertaken outside of my role as a city council member. I am proudly a member of the Reading City Council, but I chose to do this project with the help of many of you in the room, investing in this project so that we can hire consultants from outside the area that have knowledge about our area but have the expertise that we needed to help us understand the components of doing a strategic plan. So I want to thank the donors. They're listed on the white sheet of paper in the back of the room. I also want to make an announcement tonight, because I just learned yesterday, it was confirmed, that in addition to the $46,000 we had already raised to support this project. The project has been approved by the California Endowment for $20,000 grant. We just got that. And we know they do good work. We are lots of examples in our community of all of the great investments the California Endowment has made in our community. So just want to also give you an example of some of the work that's being done. For example, the Reading West Rotary is focusing on homelessness as a Rotary Club this year. I spoke already, and they're supporting this project, and they're supporting homelessness in a bigger way in our community for this year. So this is kind of examples that you can see. We're going to have meetings, just to let you know. We already have people coming up with ideas to keep having meetings at least once a month between now and during the strategic planning process. There's also an event happening in January 28th. It's sponsored by SCAR, which is Shasta County Citizens Advocating for Respect, and it's called The Faces of Homelessness. And there's a card out there, and they are announcing that for you tonight. So I want to get going because I want Nick and Eli to give us some good information on how we can do what we need to do and the right thing when it comes to our homeless population, and our whole community will be healthier and be, I think, a stronger community for that. So I'm going to have Larry Lees come up and Kurt Starman, if they can join me for a moment.
So Kristen had caught both Larry and myself before the meeting started and asked us to come up and say a couple words by introduction in this way. So a couple thoughts. First, I'll just take the opportunity, since Kristen asked us at the last minute, I want to take an opportunity to both acknowledge Kristen but embarrass her perhaps a little bit. She has done such a wonderful job. She and I talk frequently, as you might imagine, and I can tell you just how many hours and hours and hours she's put into this topic. And as she mentioned, this is not a project of the city of Reading per se, or she as a council member. This is her as someone that loves this community and wants to give back to the community and really make a difference. And so I can personally attest how much time and effort she has put into this. And as you just heard, this is step one, and there are steps to follow. And she's a fantastic fundraiser, and obviously, as evidenced by the group in the room, the crowd here in the room. It's a really important topic for our community and for the county as a whole, and so really appreciate all of you coming out to learn more about the topic, how we as a community can better address this issue. It's not a County of Shasta issue as a government agency, or a City of Reading issue as a government agency. This is a community issue that involves all of us. This is, it's government, it's nonprofits, it's the private sector, it's us as community members that really are going to make a difference here. So I really appreciate Kristen really putting some, putting the emphasis on this topic and really bringing together some tools and resources to better educate the community as a whole. Certainly, as Kristen's already alluded to, we're not the only community facing these issues. When I talk to my colleagues throughout the state, these are issues that many communities face, and it makes sense to have someone come from some folks with expertise that are objective and looking at this independently and impartially and saying, hey, you're doing some stuff well, and keep doing that type of stuff, but here's some other ideas from other areas and other communities that you might want to consider that could work for you. So to have that kind of independent, objective viewpoint is really valuable, I think, and I had was fortunate to have a look at an earlier draft of the document. I think it was really well done. I think the consulting group really understands the issue, understands our community, and came forward with some really good ideas. So I appreciate all of you coming out here today. This really is a community effort, and I know it's important. Again, this is not a City of Reading initiative or project. I can tell you for the Reading City Council, it's a very important topic. It's important for you, it's important for our community. So appreciate all of you taking your time. I know you have other places you could be, and I appreciate you being here because you care about our community.
Thank you, just to be additive only on behalf of Shasta County and the Board of Supervisors, I appreciate your attendance here today also. And I do want to take my hat off to the consultants, Eli and Nika. Thank you. It's a great, so I too have had a chance to take a look at it. It's a great, solid product that will be of great benefit to us. And you know, the words keep echoing around in my head from the old Pink Floyd song, "No More Turning Away." And if you know the song, you know, to the dark and the dreary, no more turning away. And boy, this is the beginning, really, to no more turning away. And as Kurt said, it absolutely takes all of the nonprofits that are here together. We can't have you in silos. We need to work together on this. It takes the city of Reading and the county working together. And so you know, Kurt and I have actually been meeting on this a number of times, Mr. Starman and I, a number of times as it relates to this specific subject, what we're going to do, how we're going to go forward and working together. And we've got a great solid relationship that we're in this for the long haul. We're not just going to say, okay, we got the report, now let's go on to the next thing. We're in this for the long haul. We're going to make a difference. And you know, I'll end with one quote, and again, this is on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, although Supervisor Giacomini, who is here with us, and Supervisor David Keogh, who is here with us, will not probably like this, but they too are very supportive of making a difference where we can make a difference. And you know, I just go back to Senator Humphrey and his famous line where he said, you know, all the community need to do is take care of those in the dawn of their life, those in the twilight of their life, and those in the shadows. The dawn are children, the twilight are seniors, and those in the shadows. And that's what we're not turning away from tonight. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. They had like a minute and a half notice. I was asked them to speak. So I think what it shows you is, you know, we do have a great ability to work together, the city and the county, and all of the nonprofits. Many of the groups here are here tonight. I'll let you know that at the end of the evening, we're going to have some time, and some of the nonprofits and our service providers, Shasta County Health and Human Services, are going to be set up out along the outside of the room here, or inside the wall of the room. So you can come over and ask more questions. If you don't get your question answered, or you want to learn more about a particular program, we have wonderful programs in our community. We have great government services in our community that are doing well. What we need is, we need to have some better data. We need to coordinate better and collaborate better. And we need to start working on a strategic plan, which is what Home Base is going to help us get started. And after Nika and Eli give us our PowerPoint, we're going to learn about what our next steps are. So thank you again, and appreciate everybody coming today. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. Can't say enough how wonderful it is to be working in this community, to see this many people showing up, and to have experienced firsthand and having the opportunity to talk with some of you and meet with some of you at various times over the course of our development of this report. How impressed and honoring it's been to see a community with so much heart and so much enthusiasm and investment and desire to tackle this problem and find solutions that are going to work for your community. So thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you for being here tonight. And thank you also, I see some familiar faces in the audience, people who helped us, provided information, sat with us on phone calls and at in-person meetings, giving us information that went into those reports. Thank you also for taking all the time that you did. So, tonight, we have some ambitious goals.
I have a question. Ma'am, could you introduce yourself and tell what company you're with?
Every technology I touched this week hasn't worked.
It's home base. Home base. Bottom right.
So before we get any further, I'm Nika Rapkin. We've got, I'll introduce myself a little bit more and home base a little bit more later. You're all able to hear me now? Is the microphone working okay? Great. Okay, well, up until, there we go. So our goals for tonight. We want to cover a few questions, a few commonly asked questions that we've heard from a lot of people in the community. What is the status of homelessness in Reading and Shasta County? Where do we stand right now? What's currently being done? What are the services available? What's happening in the service provider community? How can we further reduce the impact that homelessness is having on our community? And what are the next steps? And what is the community's role in the terms of those next steps? So our agenda for this evening, which again is ambitious, and we appreciate you bearing with us. Start with welcome and introductions. We'll talk a little bit about why an analysis. Why did we do this report in the first place? What does it mean for a community like Shasta County? And then we'll discuss some of our findings and recommendations from this report to help answer some of the questions that people have about what's going on right now. We'll talk about what's next, and we'll do some Q&A. As Kristen mentioned, there's 3x5 cards that are being passed around, and then there'll be some time we'll stay up afterwards and answer any questions that you have that might not have an opportunity to get answered during the question and answer period. So, who are we? And this was where I was going to introduce myself. A little bit about us. We are an agency called Homebase, and on this project we've been working collaboratively with another consultant, Symmetric Solutions. That's Scott Rich right here. He is the data guy. He did a report that was accompanying the report that we're spending most of our time on this evening on the data system called HOMELESS, the Homeless Management Information System. So we'll talk about that and explain more about that this evening. So one of the questions that we hear time and again, and it was already discussed actually a little bit by everybody actually who spoke in the last 15 minutes or so, well, why bring in consultants? Because the reality is that any solution for this community is going to need to be tailored to this community. It's going to need to be what fits Shasta County. What we can do is we can bring in the outside information that we have from working with diverse communities, large and small, across the country, including in California, and look at where those successes are and some of those tools that might be translatable here and that might be turned into something that can be an actionable plan that will be effective in the Shasta County community. So I'm talking a little bit about why an analysis, why go through this process. Before diving in, I want to say you have 3 documents. One is an FAQ that looks at some of the frequently asked questions that we hear. There is a document that summarizes the report and the recommendations. And then there's another document that's mostly blank and has opportunities for 7 inquiries. These are questions that are going to pop up through the course of the presentation. Areas where we'd really love your feedback, because the next step, as we'll be talking about more, is going to be a strategic planning process. It will be a way to get feedback from the community over the course of a several-month period to start really devising solutions. What are the priorities? What are the action steps that'll get there? So your feedback on those inquiries would be much appreciated as a way to continue to build a foundation of community input for what this plan is going to be. So if you don't already have a sheet, they're available out back, and if you could fill them in as we go and turn them in to us at the end, we really will very much appreciate them. So why an analysis? Homelessness is a tremendous challenge in Shasta County. I don't need to tell you that. I went to Kinko's to print out some of those documents you have in front of you, and somebody saw me printing them out and said, oh my goodness, homelessness here. So you all know it, and we definitely can appreciate that and appreciate the complexity of the challenge that you're facing. In terms of numbers, there was a PIC count, a point-in-time count, that took place in January, and they counted around 559 homeless persons. And that's down from the pit count 2 years ago, which was 851. But we have really good reason to believe that the numbers in the pit count were severe underestimates. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. We know that there's probably at least closer to 3,000 homeless people coming who are in the county over the course of a given year, but the situation could be even more challenging than that. One of the challenges the community faces right now is it doesn't quite know. So one of the questions we have, and what we do know is that the numbers that we have of people that we're seeing are having an impact on the community. And we want to know from you, what are the different ways that homelessness is impacting the community? So that's inquiry number 1 for the worksheet. One of the biggest challenges that communities face in terms of homelessness and its effect is the public cost. And that's one of the reasons why having a solution-driven effort can be so meaningful, because it is far, far more cost-effective to have the solutions that work and that will get people off the streets than it is to just sit back and do nothing. Because otherwise you're talking about the cost of jail, you're talking about the costs of the emergency rooms, ambulance. It gets very expensive very quickly. So all of the solutions that we're talking about this evening and that we're talking about in this report and that we're looking at in the course of the strategic planning process, these are all solutions that are cost effective, particularly in light of the public costs. The good news is that there's absolutely light in this tunnel. There are communities across the country that are having tremendous success in their homeless responses. We're seeing targeted strategies and effective coordination that has caused nationally a 33% decrease in the number of homeless veterans across the country. There's reasons that didn't happen by accident. There are specific steps that those communities have taken to make that happen. And we're talking about communities that have actually completely ended veteran homelessness. Houston, Texas, Lancaster, a city in Pennsylvania, the entire state of Connecticut, and New Orleans have all ended successfully their veteran homelessness. We also see other communities, and these are just a few, that have significantly decreased the number of homeless individuals they are having in their community. And we're specifically focusing on chronic homeless people in this particular side because they can be some of the most challenging and also the most rewarding when we're talking about solving homelessness. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for this, but we're here to help support the community and not entirely reinventing the wheel. At the end of the day, what we're seeing, regardless of if it's cost or compassion or if it's safety or support, whatever the motivation is, what we're hearing from everybody we're speaking with is that this is a community that wants to solve homelessness. So what does solving homelessness mean? What we understand is that solving homelessness means having a system of care, the right mix of affordable housing and support services, case management, addiction treatment, job training, that can help people get housed and stay housed, help people find and achieve the maximum kind of independence and self-sufficiency that they can achieve as people. And that means different things for different people, especially when we're talking about people with severe mental illness, for example, or disability. What independence means different things in different contexts. But the goal of the system is to help people maximize what that independence can be. So the real question now is, how do you build that system in a community like Shasta County? What do we have? What do we need? And how do we get there? So this is the thumbnail of the report. If you read this slide, you really don't need to know anything else about the report at all. What we found, the county already has a variety of programs, services, dedicated providers who are working really, really hard and helping a lot of people and making a tremendous difference in the community. The problem would be far worse if they were not here doing the work they were doing. We also saw that the current response, the resources, they're not sufficient to meet the need. So inquiry number 2 that we have for you is, what would it take to solve homelessness here? What's it going to take to make that happen? Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Eli to start talking a little bit about the report and how it was developed.
Hello everyone, and once again, thank you so much for welcoming us here. It's been a real pleasure to get to know a few of you, and I really look forward to working more with the community in the next few months. So before we start talking about some of the findings, and can everyone hear me?
Not very well.
Okay, I will, there's the microphone. Before we start introducing some of the findings and recommendations that came out of the report, we want to share a little bit about the process behind the report. The report has been in development over the past 6 months and includes information from stakeholder interviews with a wide range of stakeholders from the community, a stakeholder workshop that was held here in Reading on July 16th, local documentation, as well as federal regulatory requirements and evidence and research-based best practices. And Homebase also brought observations of what have been useful tools and effective strategies in other diverse communities across the country that might be interesting and available to you all also as tools. The July stakeholder workshop was a huge part of the development of this report, and also served as the beginning of what we hope is an extensive community-based and community-driven process moving forward. Nearly 60 members of the Reading and Shasta community that represented a broad cross-section of the community came together and had a really rich discussion about the gaps in the system of housing and services now, and what opportunities exist for moving that system into a stronger and more coordinated place. And I just want to note that the facilitators of that event were so struck by the amount of energy and desire to communicate and share and coordinate and positivity and warmth in that room that as someone who's come onto the project prior to that meeting, I have heard about just the amazing work that was done in that room so much. So I really look forward to being a part of that in the future. Some recurring themes that came up during that workshop include the need for a unification of vision and goals across the community, the need for strong leadership to coordinate and to move forward implementation of a community-wide strategic plan, an increase in resources that are available for housing and services for homeless people, a sustainable and sustainability and accountability, so really helping the system move forward in a way that ensures that all stakeholders are participating and that all stakeholders are working together in an effective way. And also, finally, a transformation and a re-engagement of the community around the issue of homelessness in Shasta County and in Reading, and around the response to homelessness that's ongoing. And again, before we move into some of the recommendations and findings of the report, I want to start giving a picture of what homelessness looks like in Shasta and in Reading, including some of the many reasons that people become homeless. As in most communities, the homeless population in Shasta County is incredibly diverse, and while many of the reasons for that people become homeless and struggle to maintain housing stability are fairly clear, some of them remain hidden. Many of them remain hidden. Some common causes of homelessness include mental illness, a medical crisis, but also a simple missed paycheck can result in an episode of homelessness that's very difficult for someone to exit on their own. A large number of low-income residents in Shasta County are spending as much as or more than 50% of their rent of their income on rent. So if with a month of heightened medical expenses or again a missed paycheck or some gap in finances can result in an episode of homelessness that then spirals and becomes something that's increasingly difficult to get out of without supports. Nick had mentioned previously the point in time count. The point in time count is a census of the homeless population in a community, both sheltered and unsheltered. These numbers are from the 2013 and 2015 point-in-time counts in Shasta County. As Nick mentioned, there are clear reasons to believe that particularly the 2015 count is a significant undercount of the homeless population. But one interesting aspect that these numbers do indicate is the 298 chronically homeless individuals. So while the overall numbers of homeless individuals in this count we think are much lower than the reality in the county, the numbers do give some beginning of an indication of the demographics and the breakdown of the homeless population. We are still missing critical information about who is homeless, why people are homeless, and what supports and what range and mix of services are needed to get various populations and subpopulations within our homeless residents to support them to maintain housing stability in the long term. So our third inquiry is, what do you know about the homeless population in Shasta? What information do you think would be helpful to addressing the diverse needs of this population? And what should we know and what do you need to know in order to have a basis of understanding for developing real tools and effective strategies? Absolutely. And I will give you a moment to process that inquiry. There's a lot of text up there. So we're going to move into a summary of the findings and recommendations of the report. A high-level summary, I think Nika covered this beautifully earlier, but really three points to a high-level summary of this report. One, there's so much going on right now in Shasta. It's such a rich response of services and housing that are already being provided to serve the homeless population here, which serves as a great foundation and great material for just bringing that effort together. What we heard from stakeholders is that stakeholders identified the system would benefit from a stronger centralized leadership, from more coordination, and more community-wide engagement with the strategies that are already being implemented and in imagining new, inventive, and coordinated strategies moving forward. There was also a recurring emphasis on the need for growing resources and also for allocating and targeting resources to make the most effective use of what's already present in the community. So this is just a brief picture of some of the great programs and local initiatives that currently exist in Shasta County. I'm not going to read them all, but I am going to keep talking for a couple moments so that you can read them all, because I think acknowledging what is happening and what our foundation is moving forward is a really important piece here. There are, we didn't want to make the font so small that we couldn't read it, so there were many other initiatives that we weren't able to put on this slide. There's great work going on in response to domestic violence. There's a great prevention effort happening at the moment. The work of the Crisis Recovery Center and outreach teams that are coordinating with retired law enforcement officers with a great knowledge of the community. There's so much going on right now. And the pieces that we're hearing again and again are just, how do we leverage the great work that's already happening in a coordinated way? I'm going to pass over to Nika to introduce the goals of the report and a couple of the first few.
Before we dig deeply into the fun, deep findings and recommendations and really hone in on next steps, I'd like to put a little bit of a face on what a successful homeless system of care can look like. So I'd like to bring up Derek to say a few words about his experience and the successes that he's had with the support of the community in navigating his way.
Hello. Hello, so my name is Derek Pruitt, and I've been homeless for nearly 3 years. Like this? Okay. So in opening, I would like to briefly cover 2 points for my message, and these points of how I became homeless, and what did I do, and what services, resources did I employ to become self-sufficient. Touching on how I became homeless is due to poor life choices, but those choices were not of my own. Those poor choices affected myself, my brother, my parents' ability to support both myself and my brother. For the first 2 years of homelessness, I was under the age of 18. I wasn't legally allowed to make any decisions for myself. Because I was underage, not allowed to make legal decisions, I took the initiative to study family law to find ways of getting out without having to wait to 18, such as emancipation, which are 5 characteristics which I didn't qualify for, such as financial stability, being married, religious practices, or enrolling into the military. Throughout my first 2 years, or first year and a half of being homeless, we motel hopped, and we camped for the last month, which was the final straw for me, is when I turned 18. I took myself and my brother to the Vietnamese rescue mission to kind of find services to help me no longer be homeless. It's where I was enrolled into the work search program, where I learned about the youth program at the Smart Center. It was a fantastic program that helped me land a job, gainfully employed with Matt Morgan, Optimize Worldwide. But before I was employed by Matt Morgan, I went to the Homeless Rockstar youth event with Nigel, where I met Felicia Snow and Wendy Zanatella of United Way, where they offered me to have a mock interview. And that mock interview turned quick into a conversation and then to an interview for a marketing and PR intern that was first unpaid. Then the Smart Center decided to create the internship to become paid, where my roles expanded beyond online marketing and PR relationships, was also web development and IT management, where I helped streamline technological infrastructures to help better employ resources that United Way have to affect the community and collective impact. I'm still working with United Way, and I've also extended my volunteerism to the Homeless Rockstars, and I hopefully to the mission. I just really want to give back to the community and to those that helped me no longer become homeless. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. We really appreciate you graciously taking the time to share your story with us tonight. Appreciate it very much. So now to talk about some of the findings and recommendations. And just to summarize these here, and we'll share with you, there's a piece of paper that has a link to the report in it, and we also will share with you a slide that has the link to the report in it, so you can read it in all of its 40-page glory. 23 pages for the HMIS, so 63 pages total. We'll give you the fun stuff tonight. There's 5 categories of recommendations in this report. There's recommendations encouraging greater community engagement, encouraging the development of a plan for greater community engagement. And by the way, we're going to be digging into all of these in detail shortly, so I'm just introducing them right now. Recommendations around community strategic planning, recommendations around building greater centralized leadership, recommendations around building the right mix of services in the system of care and the most effective services that are going to maximize outcomes in terms of leading people to independence, and improving the data systems and creating a community-wide data structure that can give us the information that we need to address this problem in a sustainable way. And then people ask, well, what about resources? Because that's the one thing that everybody asks. This is all about resources. All of these recommendations are about what can lead the community utilizing the resources better, and bringing more resources in. Let's talk first about community engagement. With each of these recommendations in the report, there's a lot of discussion of what's already in the community, what are the community's strengths already, and what are some of the challenges, what are some of the gaps, what's missing. So we're addressing a few of these this evening. In terms of strengths, I would say first and foremost tonight, you're all here tonight, so that's demonstration number one of how engaged this community can be. The July 16th stakeholder meeting had over 60 people, and that conversation was simply extraordinary. The degree of volunteerism and support, especially from and including the faith community, and just overall, this sense where you're time telling this is a generous community. And then a public sentiment that something must be done. This is going to take the community a long way. In terms of challenges, there's insufficient public information about homelessness, insufficient understanding about what the service system does, and what it's doing out there right now. There's also frustration and a lack of awareness about and support for the kinds of interventions that could most make a difference in this community in terms of solving homelessness. I'll talk about just an example of one of these strengths that we're seeing. One of the really neat initiatives that's going on, one of many new initiatives, but one that we wanted to just point out tonight, the faith community has been developing a community care fund. And the idea is to bring resources to help people to, let's say sometimes it's just a utility deposit or it's a first month's rent, and that's what's keeping people from being housed for the long term. So to provide those kinds of supports, people want to give, but it's hard sometimes to know where to give in a way that's actually going to solve the problem. Stakeholders are also exploring ways to get community members involved in things like housing navigation, linking people up with apartments in the community. So one reason that this particular example is so powerful is that it's a way that the community is focusing resources on some of the things that are actually key barriers to housing. It's something to really be proud of. There's a lot of other ways the community can get involved. Pretty much there is a seat for everybody at this table, and it really is a community problem, and therefore has community solution. There's landlords, and landlord engagement is a critical opportunity to meaningfully impact the system. Homeless individuals, and formerly homeless individuals, face a lot of challenges when they're trying to get an apartment. They don't have good credit. They don't have connections in the community. There may not be a person to write a letter of reference for them. And landlords have fears around that. And there's ways to address those fears. And to have landlords at the table in a way that is mutually beneficial for everybody. So those are some ways that landlords, as community members, have a critical role to play. Another important player, and this is the business community. Studies show that the vast majority of homeless people, approximately 88% in most studies, want to be employed. Or they already are employed, but they're still in the streets because they haven't quite been able to make ends meet. With the right tools and the right support, many homeless people can be very successful in the workplace. And so support around the business community, from the business community, is an opportunity to help individuals to develop job skills, create work opportunities, and so forth. And that, again, is just an example of the way that the business community can get involved. But the business community often is a key player because of concerns around how homelessness can maybe impacting, let's say, the downtown district and so forth. This is a way to get all the players at the table so that we're all driving forward solutions together. And lastly, community at large. The bottom line is that solving homelessness is something that requires everybody to come to the table together. So participation in the planning process that we're talking about is in identifying steps that are going to turn the tide on homelessness here is a crucial way for people to get involved. So our recommendation in brief is that steps be taken to engage the community, fostering a united front and broad support for the solutions that can address homelessness. Developing a community engagement plan, developing unified messaging, particularly an understanding that this is a problem that can be solved. So inquiry number 4, information we'd love to know from you, is how should the community learn about homelessness in the service system? And what information should they have? What should people know? What do they need to know to help drive this forward? Then another one of our recommendations is focused around the right mix of services. And again, these are the overview recommendations. They drill down, and some of them get pretty technical in the report proper. So in talking about the service system, we've seen a variety of different strengths. We see a dedicated service sector, many committed agencies. They're doing phenomenal work to help prevent and end homelessness in the community. We're seeing a lot of meaningful formal and informal communication, particularly between agency to agency. Successful leveraging of mainstream resources, things like CalWorks and the Mental Health Services Act dollars, and some money that is strategically leveraged and focused on efforts and initiatives and programs that are ending homelessness in the community. And we see an existing foundation for every pillar of what a homeless response needs: prevention, outreach, and the supports and housing that make the homeless system go. We also saw very many challenges, particularly inadequate housing and supports. There's just simply not enough to meet the need. And there's a tremendous demand for more housing and more case management. At this point, there's only 34 permanent supportive housing beds, and that's excluding DASH, which is Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing. But in terms of the reported beds to HUD, there's only 34. And as you may recall from what Eli said, there's nearly 300 chronically homeless people that were counted in the PIT count, and we know that's an undercount. So 34 to 300 is a ratio that needs to be addressed. Most programs in the community are not permanent housing. They're not housing first. And then there's some federal and state funding opportunities that are currently going unrealized. So some chances to bring funding into the system, but the system's not currently there yet where it has the capacity to actually be bringing that money in. So what is it that ends homelessness in terms of the service system? This sounds silly to say, but it is actually true. What ends homelessness is housing. Communities have two choices. They can, without housing, people fall down a homeless spiral. It doesn't take much, particularly for people who are poor, who may be living on the edge. It doesn't take much to fall into homelessness. A missed paycheck, a broken water heater, a medical crisis, and that's it. And once you're on the streets, it is really tough to dig yourself out. It's tough to get the care that you need. It's tough to stabilize. If you need to be taking medication, it's really hard to take your medication when you need to take your medication when you're living on the streets. If you need to be seeing your case manager, it's tough for your case manager to find you when you may be traveling from place to place in a given evening. When your life becomes a fight for survival, it's really hard to stabilize and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So housing first the idea is that having a place to stay leads to stability. So our focus over the next few slides is on permanent housing and what can permanent housing mean. There's two kinds of permanent housing that I'd like to talk about tonight. Two models that are particularly cost-effective and particularly effective in terms of helping people stay housed and ensuring that they have the resources that they need to stabilize and not fall back into homelessness. So the first of those is permanent supportive housing, which is essentially a permanent subsidy and wraparound support services or case management support. This is targeted for people with long-term needs, intensive needs, who would be on the streets if they didn't have this kind of support. The other kind of housing that can be particularly effective in helping households get off the street is called rapid rehousing. And these are time-limited subsidies. Often they last for about 3 months to 2 years, and they also involve case management and support, job training. Really, it's often a very flexible model that is developed to meet the particular needs of that household. Some people need more support than others. And so that helps households so they can get back on their feet. And then when the program is ended, they remain in that unit, but they're no longer receiving the case management or other kinds of supports or for the subsidies. There's a lot of evidence behind the cost effectiveness of permanent housing. Permanent supportive housing sounds expensive, but when you look at the costs of homelessness on the community, if we go back to that slide that we were talking about earlier with the ambulance on it, with the list of jail and all of those different ways that people living on the streets can be expensive to the community, permanent supportive housing can be very cost effective. And there's also a lot of evidence behind the effectiveness of these models. Most people who are placed in a good permanent housing program with the right kind of support stay there. They don't become homeless again.
That's right.
So I mentioned earlier, this is what we currently have reported in the system. These are the numbers that are reported to HUD as part of what we call the housing inventory count. There's some additional housing that's not here reported in this. As I mentioned, the VASH vouchers, and also the county has a CalWorks rapid housing program that's had some considerable success. But again, when you look at these numbers, it's not enough when we're talking about thousands of people. So in brief, the recommendations that we have around building this service system to effectively reduce homelessness is promoting evidence-based practices, taking the services in the system that we already have and maximizing the outcome and making sure that those services are really honed in on the things that are going to optimize results. Realigning resources to make sure that the resources and the money that's being spent is really targeted on the kinds of services that are going to really solve homelessness in this community and have a tapestry of and a balance of that makes sense between what's needed and what's there, and increasing resources, establishing those systems to bring in those dollars. Again, the inquiry for you as a community is, what do you understand to be the priorities here? And what kind of people do you understand to be falling through the cracks? I'm going to turn it back over to Eli now to start talking about some of what we saw in terms of leadership.
So some of our recommendations and what we heard from stakeholders around leadership have to do with the continuum of care. And I want to answer a really frequently asked question in almost every community. What is a continuum of care, or a COC? Continuum of care is really a flexible structure, and by definition, it's a coalition of stakeholders within a community who are concerned and invested in developing a response to homelessness. The continuum of care was created through a particular Department of Housing and Urban Development funding stream, but HUD really leaves it up to each community to determine how the COC is going to function and what its structure is going to be. The COC is generally open to membership by any agency or individual who wants to participate and attend meetings. And the intention or the purpose behind a continuum of care is to support coordination in a response to homelessness to make sure that needs are identified and that resources are allocated to meet those needs, and also to develop leadership and coordination to pull community efforts together. In Shasta County, the Continuum of Care actually meets monthly. It has a membership of between 40 and 50 agencies, and it is the potential to be a nexus and a great source of leadership. Some of the strengths that exist currently that we've identified through conversation with stakeholders are very dedicated individuals who are taking initiative and proactively driving forward efforts independently and collaboratively in the community. The COC did successfully receive an award through its 2014 Continuum of Care competition funding application of about $375,000 in funding for housing and services. And there, we heard a strong community voice in favor of building leadership and really calling for a greater central and coordinating leadership role, which is a really great place to start. Some of the challenges that we heard were a lack of a common understanding of who is taking that leadership role, a lack of a nexus or a hub to pull everybody together. That because of that, the initiatives that are happening are fairly independent, with collaboration at the agency level and much less collaboration at the community level. That the COC, the Continuum of Care, is under-resourced. That maybe there aren't the resources available at the moment for the Continuum of Care to take that leadership role on fully. Our recommendations around leadership, in sum, are to identify a unifying leadership body that will act as a hub for coordinated action, and to push forward and to implement a unified vision and shared goal setting and development of priorities. So this will flow into our some recommendations further down the road when we talk about strategic planning processes, where the leadership role will be to drive forward and to also oversee the implementation of some of the strategic planning that hopefully will happen. So the fifth section of recommendations is around data. And again, I'm going to answer a frequently asked question. It's really those acronyms that always come up that we get questions about, really understandably. So the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, is an information system. It's a big data system, really, to collect information and manage client information in a secure and private way, to help monitor program performance, and to help identify who is homeless in a community, what services are being provided, and what services might be needed. So the HMIS can be a great tool, both at the level of individual projects, being able to look at project data about who you're serving and what outcomes are in order to drive forward maybe adjustments in program models, or to identify needed resources, or to congratulate excellent work that's being done. It can be really effective at the community level as well, to identify what services are being done very well, and maybe what areas need more resources and more technical support and more training. HMIS can be a great source of data that can be used to drive funding streams. If you can show a lot of federal funding and state funding sources require data in order to apply, and a lot of private funders are very compelled by seeing numbers in a very data-driven world that we're living in. Some of the strengths that we've seen in Shasta County are that there is an existing HMIS system that is operated through the county, and that is in place at the moment. We found that there was substantial community feedback supporting the expansion of HMIS. So there is a community desire to continue building this HMIS system and to fully utilize it. And there's an interest in using HMIS for coordinated entry. Coordinated entry is the idea that you have a way for folks to access the entire system of housing and services for homeless people at a single point of entry or at multiple points of entry that will direct them to the specific housing and services that they need in that moment. It really is a high level of coordination, and it's a really great goal to be working towards. Some of the challenges that we saw, that we heard from stakeholders, are that there is at the moment insufficient data about the homeless population. There's a real need for a greater understanding of what the population looks like and how they're being served. There's limited staffing at the moment for the current HMIS system, limited resources, and a real strain on the ability of that system to accommodate the needs of a county like Shasta. And for a number of reasons, including the limited resources available, there are few participating agencies, so that the data that's available isn't giving a full picture of the community as a whole. Why data? I think I saw a lot of nods around the room when I was talking about using data at the project level and at the community level to identify areas of growth, identify areas of strength, and identify places where resources are needed. Data can help a community or an individual project get the most out of the resources that you have and identify where more resources are needed, and also to obtain those resources by presenting a very compelling picture of what needs you're seeing and what opportunities are there for real outcomes that will come from the additional resources. So in sum, developing a key data system, a central data system, and a fully fledged HMIS that can support participation across the community by programs that are required to use HMIS, by programs that elect to use HMIS, to really develop a full, rich set of data about Shasta County. And our final aspect of the report, recommendations and findings, is planning. There is already some planning that happens at the county level in terms of the consolidated plan, and also at the program level in terms of program strategic plans. There is real meaningful collaboration happening between agencies that is helping already to make limited resources go further and be more effective. And as we've mentioned before, we saw at the July 16th stakeholder workshop, there is a real dedication to community-wide engagement with this issue and collaboration. Some of the challenges that we see are that while there's coordination happening between agencies, there's a lack of coordination across the community, as we've mentioned, and a variety of different initiatives are happening that may benefit from interaction and from sharing resources that haven't been able to make that connection. And that there's a lack of a shared vision or a consensus around what priorities and goals the community has set and what steps to take to reach those goals. Our recommendations around community planning center on conducting a community planning process. This is a strategic plan process that will, we hope, engage communities, engage stakeholders across the community, that will be grounded in a real picture and a data-based picture of what the needs are in the community, that will focus on best practice and evidence-based program models in a way that makes sense for the needs and the realities on the ground here, that establishes a process for implementation of the strategic plan so that this isn't just wallpaper, that it will be something that's a living document that will be revisited and that will have identified key implementers to take the leadership to make sure that steps happen, and that focuses on both short and intermediate goals that emphasize the system's stability and maximizing system resources moving forward, so that through the strategic planning process and through the implementation process, the system itself becomes stronger and survives in the long term.
So now we're going to bring up Nigel Skeet of Homeless Rockstars fame. He's going to take a second to get set up there, show some of his images, and help put a face on what we're talking about here today. Also, while he's setting up, I just want to say a few more words about strategic planning. We'll talk after Nigel's done, talk just a few slides more about next steps and where we go from here. But I want to make an observation that the recommendations that you're seeing probably aren't rocket science and probably aren't surprising to people. And the big question, the big elephant in the room becomes, how do you do it? How do you get leadership in there? How do you create a system that works? Getting an understanding of what that might look like, but how do we get from here to there? And that's what this community planning process is about. It's about identifying those action steps, figuring out who's going to be responsible, figuring out who the face of the homeless response system is going to be for the community, and creating that coordination. So community strategic planning really accomplishes two things. One is you get this document that's not wallpaper, that doesn't get stuck in a drawer, but that is, as Eli mentioned, a living document that actually can itself identifies a process for implementation over the years that gets revisited and updated to reflect current needs. But second, there's a process, and the process is almost the beauty and the magic of the thing. We saw an abbreviated version of that on July 16th, and this is more of an extended version of that. What can we get from having a process where we're bringing people together to talk about the problem and focus on solutions with the background landscape that is part of what we understand to be our contribution of what the specific tools are that could help the community. So what are the evidence-based practices? What does the data say? What are other communities doing? So it's a marriage of the two. It's a marriage of the community and what the community knows, and the information and best practices to basically create a process for actualizing a system of care and actualizing those recommendations. So that's why you're not seeing a whole lot about the how in this presentation, because that's all about the how. Now I'm going to turn it over to Nigel to help put a fun face on this.
Did you say fame? If that's the case, then fame is very expensive. Okay. So my name is Nigel. I know quite a few of you. If you'd have told me this time last year that I'd be standing here and being some kind of homeless advocate, I would have said you were nuts. In fact, 1 year ago today was day one of our Homeless Rockstar shoot. Jenny, where are you? Jenny Espino. It's all Jenny's fault. She actually decided to put me on the front page of the Record Searchlight in full color. It was just an idea, but she wanted to interview me about my homeless project. And my homeless project was just an idea. But she put me on the front page of the newspaper, so that kind of forced me to put it into action. Okay? They actually sent a photographer down to photograph the photographer. And the opening line was, celebrity rock star photographer Nigel Skeet is going to be photographing 50 homeless people like he would a rock star. Oh my God. Okay, gotta do it. So in brief, the reason I did this is I've been a rock photographer all my life. Ever since I was 14, photographed AC/DC, yes. I moved to LA when I was 20, landed in the 80s metal scene, and photographed all the metal bands in LA, and got involved in the movie industry. And one of the last gigs I actually had was working as the staff photographer for the LA City Attorney's Office and also with the District Attorney's Office. And one of the things we did is work on Skid Row. Didn't think anything of it. In LA, when you go by Skid Row, it's part of the scenery. When I moved up to Reading, I was under the radar for about 4 years, raising my twin daughters, who are now almost 6, going on 18. And last year, I decided to open up a studio, a photography studio in downtown Reading. And one of the first things somebody said to me was, "You got to be careful of that homeless problem around here." And I kind of looked around, and to be honest, I said, "What problem?" Like, I'm used to Skid Row. Okay, there's thousands of people living in boxes. I work with the LACD Attorney's Office. We put together the CCTV footage of people killing each other on Skid Row, the drug cartels, the human trafficking, and other things that will remain nameless. And I didn't see that here. So it was my gut reaction. It was a little bit of a bullying thing. That was just my gut reaction. So I decided, what would happen if I was to photograph some homeless people, like I would a rock star, and interview them like I would a rock star, for the strict purpose of creating a sense of relatability, being able to relate to somebody. I had no idea of the effect that it was going to have. But Felicia was there on day one, right? And so, over the course of 3 days, I photographed 50 homeless people, and we interviewed 50 homeless people from the mission. They each got hair and makeup. We didn't change their clothes. People say, "Oh, you gave them a full-blown makeup and a makeover and all that kind of stuff." No. We specifically kept them in the clothes that they wore so they could be comfortable. Their hair and makeup, I struggled with the hair and makeup on day one. Like, do I do this or do I not? Do I do before and afters and all that kind of stuff? And about an hour before the first shoot, I got an unsolicited email from somebody saying, "Yeah, that project of yours, don't do hair and makeup because then they won't look like homeless people." I was like, okay, hair and makeup, here we go. Hair and makeup and no befores. Just the way they are, just the way we would a rock star. I did my photo session and then we did the interviews. The interviews had nothing to do with why they're homeless, because that's not something that we can relate to, okay? The interviews were a simple inquiry as to who these people are as a human being. Simple questions that you and I take for granted, that we answer to strangers on Facebook every single day. What's your favorite band? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? Do you have any interesting talents? What's your greatest accomplishments? What are you grateful for? Stuff like that. And it was a strange thing that happened, to be honest with you. Felicia will attest to this, and Doug, who was there. The ones who were doing the interviewing got that transformation first. Because all of a sudden that nameless, faceless homeless person turned into a human being with a name, and similar hopes and dreams, and similar interests, and all that kind of stuff. And they became a possibility. And the strange thing happened with those who were homeless. They started to feel respected for the first time in a long time. And you could see their self-esteem come forward. So this is what, let's see here. Okay, so you may have seen this up front. This is kind of what it looks like. We did a Homeless Rockstars youth event at the Stirring on July 1st, which is where we met Derek. Derek's amazing, by the way. This was the very first picture I took, this time last year. And I had no idea what to expect, and I emailed this picture to Jonathan after the first night. He took it down to the chapel, and he showed everybody there, and he sent me this amazing text back saying, this picture changed the entire atmosphere in the mission. That they actually started calling each other rock stars. And that was kind of great. Stacy, one of our first rock stars on day one, she now works at the mission, and she's a case manager. Carson, day one or day two, he now works at Starbucks right here in Los Angeles. Carrie, this one kind of freaked me out. When I was done with the project, because I opened my mouth and inserted my foot, And I thought I was done, like that's it, I'm gonna move on to other things. I started getting messages from people who participated in this project, and they actually picked themselves up and out and went home. And this was one of them, Carrie. She ended up going home to Florida, and I got an unsolicited email saying, that was amazing, thank you, I got my life back together, and I'm back in Florida, and I'm doing great. Alexandria, she ended up going home to North Carolina. Debbie's amazing, she's still here. We talk about services. I'm not a services expert. You guys are all the data people. Debbie is one of those people that because she was in the mission, and she was homeless, and she needed surgery, she did not qualify. I'm not quite sure the exact details, but she's hurting because she can't get the surgery that she needs. She had a stroke. Tammy, I want you to remember Tammy. Tammy is the mom of the mission. She watched out over the young ones. And I just want you to remember Tammy. Okay? This is Jessie. Jessie's our poster child. Photographed her on day one. When this thing started to take off, which was kind of crazy, I remember by interviewing Jessie that one of her greatest accomplishments was getting a full ride scholarship for baking. So when we started talking about doing more events, I called her and said, are you still into the whole culinary thing? And she goes, absolutely. I said, how would you like to be part of our team and cater all of our events? And she said, absolutely. There's at least two things that all the people who I've met who are homeless have in common. Number one, they are completely overwhelmed to the point where they're numb. And it can be overwhelmed with something small, something big, doesn't matter. The other thing that they almost all have in common is if they could, they'd help the other one out. So Jessie said, absolutely, I'm right there. And when we did our second event in March, she and her mom came down on their own dime, catered the whole event, and she was serving those amongst whom she used to live. And this is Jessie. When she came to our event, we got her sponsored. And it was me. I still can't talk about it, but anyway. Everybody wants to be a rock star, even Mike Mangus. Now, so for me, it's this, right? So when this thing started to become effective, and my name was on it, I really had to take a step back and wonder, like, okay, so what exactly is going on here? And if I'm going to lend my name to it, why is it as effective as it is? And I am kind of an analytical geek, so this was my conclusion. When somebody becomes homeless, they disconnect themselves from the community in an artificial manner, and that's brick and mortar. The community at large disconnects them psychologically and emotionally, yet expects them to earn back that connection. Okay? We throw them away. So what we do at our events, at that very moment, is we represent the community, and at that very moment, and we've seen it over and over again, we repair that psychological and emotional connection on the spot. Happens 80% of the time. And thereby it creates an opportunity for the other part of the connection to be restored. And that can't happen because of a handout or feeling sorrow or pity. We've had so many people want to come on board with this thing. And rule number one is no sorrow, no pity. I want you to treat them exactly like you would your friend or your sister. Okay. Derek is amazing, not because of what we did. Felicia and Wendy, we issued him a challenge. Rather than give him a handout, some clothes, some socks, whatever, we said, follow up the next day with your resume and Felicia will go over your job skills. And it became this ping pong thing. Okay? So all we did really, to be honest with you, is treat him like a regular human being. Sorry, Derek. So for me, what this whole thing has turned into, it's about the community. It's not necessarily about the homeless. This was Christina. For me, this is what it's about. The fact that we were able to get a nameless, faceless homeless person on April 17th that nobody knew, and 2 weeks later, she's actually, we got her an audition tape, rehearsal at the Civic Auditorium, okay? And we had about 200 people there, and the media's there, and Mike Mangus is there, and nothing, you were there. This to me is what it's about. Mike Mangus taking a selfie of himself with Christina. So my question to you is this, and I know it sounds silly, and I hate saying the word, but I'm serious. When do you ever see a TV news anchor taking a selfie of himself with a homeless person? The fact that, let me just work back. So this is Derek when we first met him. There are, to be honest with you, some cases that are really, really sad. This is Curly Buck. She's 12 years old. And a few weeks ago, somebody said to me, hey, there was a raid at the Reading Inn. Said, there was a young girl that was taken by CPS. Isn't this one of yours? And I said, yeah, this is one of mine. I don't want to get into the details, but we are now, in fact, talking with CPS and some other people involved in trying to get her situation sorted out. You mentioned community involvement. What I've been amazed at is the community support, the volunteers, and the people who participated in this project as a rock star come back to volunteer. This is Justin. Met him here, April. Last week, we did an event in Santa Rosa, Homeless Rock Stars event in Santa Rosa. And there he is with his daughter. I'm like, oh my gosh. He just showed up. He said, I love what you did. I want to help. And he was there all day volunteering. Here's Derek. This is, it's going to sound weird, but this is what it's about for me. Christian Schrader gave Derek and Bryce a ride to Santa Rosa. And Derek went from the one being interviewed to interviewing. He actually interviewed our homeless rock stars in Santa Rosa. And I asked him, how was it for you? He goes, that's kind of weird. So last week it was meant to be homeless veterans, and we did do a lot of veterans, but we also did a lot of families. This was a homeless veteran that served in Iraq, 29 years old, and is going to school for, is now going back to school for computer technology. This is Malcolm. He's a homeless veteran in Santa Rosa, and he's a poet. And he read us poetry at the event. And he got up there and he said, and I'm all about the challenge. He said, you can take one picture, one click. This is my one click. I wanted this to be the poster shot for Santa Rosa, but this family is involved in a domestic violence dispute and we can't publish the pictures. Okay, I'm going to close with this. I don't shoot a lot of weddings. They either have to be far away or there has to be a cake fight. Over the last 3-4 years, I've shot a few weddings. This couple are amazing. Kaylee was from here, and they flew me to Bali to shoot their wedding. And the whole thing probably cost $100,000. A few months ago, I photographed a wedding here at the White House. Probably cost $15,000. They're still going to be paying for it for the next 2 years. It was amazing. A few weeks ago, I shot Tammy and Anthony's wedding. Tammy at the Good News Rescue Mission. Wedding cost $8.50. So my lesson is, what I want to implore you, that these people are not them over there. They're us. There was just as much, if not more love, in this $8.50 wedding than there was in the $100,000 wedding halfway around the world. The place was packed. The mission was packed. And it was just amazing. The one thing I ask as a community, that we don't say them and us. I've gotten to know so many of these people, and I can't even say the word homeless. The word homeless to me is wrong. Okay? It's just like describing somebody as homed and leaving it at that. And I'm going to leave it at that. our, our project is a little strange, and we have a hard time selling it. Hi, Lisa. It's been effective here, and when we went to Santa Rosa, we said, okay, we want your city council involved, we want your city leaders involved, we want your community leaders involved, and they were kind of like, what are you talking about? You know? So it was kind of a tough sell. But we said, you gotta do it, you gotta get to know these people, you gotta participate. We went down, did it, we had 70 homeless people come in, 20 community leaders. Next day, early morning, email, can you come and do it again? Right? So we're gonna go do it again. And we're gonna do it in Sacramento. We're gonna get the California legislature involved. We're gonna have the California legislature come and interview homeless people. That's what we're gonna do. In April, we're going to Boulder, Colorado for a homeless youth event. And we're also going to Seattle. Kristen, by the way, I'll leave it this. Kristen is amazing because she's a maverick. You're amazing. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful. I had read about this in the Record Searchlight, but hadn't actually had an opportunity to see it myself. So thanks very much for that. We've just got a couple of more slides to go. And so Eli and I are going to race each other and see if he can get the slides up quickly enough, or maybe we'll just plow right through. I believe Kristen and others will start passing out cards in case people have questions. We'll do Q&A after this. But we're going to talk now about what's next. We've talked a little bit about strategic planning. And sorry, I currently had the password to the computer on the back of my notes, so Eli was trying to take my notes for me just now. So the next question, where do we go from here? And the question, I think that's particularly for this forum, is how can the community get involved? When we're talking about the community, we're talking about all of the different sectors of the community. So as we've mentioned, the next step in this process is going to be strategic planning. And what we understand strategic planning to be is a community process where stakeholders are working together to identify priorities and an actionable path to achieving those priorities. So the questions that will be answered during this process are what needs to be done, who's going to do it, what steps need to be taken, and what's the timeline. And also systems to make it measurable, to make it something accountable. Because accountability means sustainability. People want to invest in a sustainable system where where it's clear what the answer is, and it's clear that folks are going to be actually held to what they're committing to do. So we have a slide that you can't see. It looks like Eli's getting there. It's a question of who should be involved. Who really matters in this process? Oh no, we keep saying everybody, but it really is everybody. It's everybody's impacted by this. The hospitals are impacted by it. Law enforcement is impacted by it. Certainly, our elected representatives are affected. Housing authorities. This is really a process where, because everybody's part of a solution, it's important to get everybody there. And this is the last substantive slide before we get to our Q&A. The question is, so how can the community get involved? Please support the plan development. It'd be wonderful to have you there. There'll be community meetings and opportunities for feedback, and we really want to hear your voice. Sustaining the dialogue around homelessness in this community is critical. There's so much information that needs to be disseminated about what homelessness means, what the solutions are, that this is a solvable problem. So hoping to continue that conversation and not just sweep the issues under the rug, that's essential. And then, as mentioned in a variety of different ways, there's so many opportunities to become a part of the solution, whether it's volunteering for the point in time count, or volunteering with NIDL's group or at the mission. There's so many different opportunities to contribute your services and support and actually get involved in the solution. So I realize that we've been talking a lot about the opportunities the community has to get involved. We would be really curious if there's things we haven't said about ways you think the community should be getting involved, and what the community's role should be in terms of driving solutions. So now we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. And I didn't realize it's been a fairly long night already. So we'll keep the Q&A relatively brief, but then what we're going to do is we're going to stay after. So let's do some questions now. For a few minutes, and then we'll stay after and answer questions to your heart's content.
Hi there. We'll answer a few questions here, or ask and answer a few questions here, and then I really want to encourage that you stay afterwards, because we have community. I'm going to share with you real quick. We have community members, service providers who are here in the room. We'll be happy to stay after and answer questions specifically. So we have Shasta County Health and Human Services Agency, and they can talk about housing and case management. We have the Reading Homeless Day Resource Center. Ann Corin we're going to be around the room. She's over there. And she's also, for example, is responsible for the volunteer. You can volunteer there. She's going to be their volunteer coordinator for the point in time count, which is in January. So if you get information from Ann and sign up through the website she set up to be able to help us with the point in time count. Also, there's a point in time count committee that's here today, and they're selling chocolate to help support their efforts, if you're here would like something sweet at this point. We also have the Shasta Community Health Center, Shasta County Community Health Center, and the HOPE organization. I have to tell you, I went out with Dr. McMullen and Heather Russell this past week, and they are amazing people. Excuse me. The service that they provide our community, not just for them, they do it for their patients who are, like for example, underneath the Cypress Street Bridge. I'll tell you a quick story. I know we're going over a little bit late, but I went to see one of their patients, and I engaged in a conversation with a gentleman standing next to him, standing next to a bike. I said, "Oh, what's your name?" Asked him a little bit, get a little bit of idea who he was. He said his name was Chris, and he said, I said, "Oh, did you go to high school here?" And he said, "Yeah, class of Enterprise, class of 76. I'm class of 74. I said, "Oh, my sister's in class of 76. He said, "What's your last name?" In school, and I told him. He said, "Well, he remembered that my mother worked at Mistletoe School where we both attended, blocks from right where we're here right now. He remembered the big bomber that they set up in the school playground, which we couldn't do today, that we played on." And I'm talking to him there. So our community is who are homeless. It's not a bunch of people coming from outside of the area. There are more people that I've met that are born and raised here, just like Chris, that I met down at the Cypress Street Bridge. So I want to thank all the medical providers. The emergency rooms, I've been meeting more and more people, and we're doing amazing work as we've talked about tonight. We just need to coordinate better. Again, the Community Care Fund, Leisha will be here to talk about the Community Care Fund that was mentioned, and Danielle will be here from Bethel Benevolence to answer any questions. And we have, they're going to be around the rooms here. Feel free, also, Scott will be here to talk about the HOMIS report if you have any questions, and Nika and Eli will be here too if you have additional questions. So, I forgot what I did with my questions. I give them here.
I stole them all.
Oh, you did?
I did. Somebody's in charge.
Good, somebody's in charge. So, go ahead.
So in the interest of time, I took a look and wanted to collect together a couple of the ones that ask some similar questions. So we'll try to cover as many as we can with the understanding that we're already well into the evening. So to the extent that we don't cover them tonight, we'll take about 10 minutes now. will stay after and answer additional questions that you've got. So one question that we'd like to address head on, because it's a question we hear a lot: what percentage of our homeless population are native to our area? And what percentage are coming from elsewhere? Now, a piece of not having good data, which is what we've been talking about, is not having specific numbers to give you. We know two things. One thing that we know is that for a number of years, there were surveys taking place, going into encampments and surveying people in the general homeless population. And the information that was coming back from those surveys is that an overwhelming number of the people in the homeless community, and I can't recall the numbers off the top of my head, they have connections to Shasta County. Either they have friends or family who are here, or they've been living here for several years and have fallen into homelessness since then. So one thing, and again, the other piece of what we do know is one thing that's interesting. We get this question all the time in all the communities we work in. There's this fear that, and I'll just put it out there, this fear that if we build services, it's going to attract people to the community. It's going to increase the problem. And the reality is that what we're seeing in the communities that we work in is that isn't the case. California has a homeless problem. It's a problem in communities across the state in a big way. The communities that are tackling it head on are making progress. And so it's basically, the reality is that it is so much more costly to the system to do nothing, that nothing isn't an option. So anyways, that would be the best we can do with a question for which we still have very limited data. There's a number of questions here regarding where are the homeless people in terms of this conversation. How do they feel about their treatment in the community here? Where are they at the table? How are they helping to drive policy solutions? That's a great question, because they're a critical part of the solution. And an important piece of strategic planning is understanding how members of the homeless community interface with the system. Because if they're not accessing the system isn't developed in a way that makes sense, that helps people to connect to the services that they need, then the system isn't actualizing its potential, and it's not maximizing outcomes, and it's wasting very, very valuable resources.
Amen.
So having a homeless voice at the table, absolutely essential. And so there's a lot of different mechanisms that will come into play in terms of getting feedback, focus group, and making sure that when we're talking about the community being involved, that they're a part of the community that's involved. I think we've got time for a couple more. This one is, what are the barriers keeping government agencies, nonprofits, and faith-based organizations from collaborating? So this is a little bit of a complex question to answer, because two things. First, on an agency-to-agency level, we're seeing a tremendous amount of collaboration. We're seeing some really great initiatives where you have this agency here taking its resources. Let's say, for the example, to give you something concrete, the Hope Van providing services at the Good News Rescue Mission. That's just an example. I could list dozens, probably, a great many, of ways that the service system that they're leveraging the resources that they have to get the most out of what's pretty limited in terms of funding. What we're not seeing is the community-wide systemic leveraging and systemic collaboration. We're seeing a lot of, geez, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I really wish that I knew what these other agencies were doing. I wish we were working together. I wish we were focusing on resources more and not duplicating efforts. And the reason that that's not happening, two things. One is there's no structure in place. There's not the investment in leadership that makes that happen. That requires financial commitment, that requires resources to have that structural system. There needs to be leadership and there needs to be a system. And that's when people actually have a structure that they can be doing that collaboration and communication in. So the answer to the question is, it's not necessarily a failing of the service providers or these agencies, so much as it's, we haven't taken that step yet in investing in the system. And that's what needs to happen next.
So we have two questions here that I wanted to address very quickly. First, how do you ask a human being to be data? And this is about the data in the HMIS system. It's an excellent question. And it's a question that every community that has data collection in every HMIS addresses. You ask a human being to contribute to a data collection as a human being. I think many of you know more about building relationships of trust and communication with folks who are being served by agencies. And that's where, what we've seen is that's where it starts. It starts with a conversation and an engagement around what is the purpose of this data that a person is being generous with and providing. What is going to be done in the community, and specifically to what is the purpose of the request that's being made for data. I think ground rules are data has to be provided with full informed consent and based on a conversation that's based in trust and in a relationship. And what is your definition of homelessness? And I love this question because it gives me an opportunity to talk about the definition of homelessness. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has a very specific set of definitions of homelessness that never jive completely with a community's understanding of homelessness. So the HUD definition of homelessness is very explicit. It talks about situations that people are living in on the streets or in places not meant for human habitation, in shelter, in transitional housing situations. It talks about chronic homelessness with a very specific definition of a long term of homelessness and a diagnosis with a disability. Community definitions and understandings of homelessness are generally much broader than that. We know that people are homeless when they're living in RVs. We know that people are homeless when they're living families doubled up. We know that people are homeless when they're living in substandard housing. So I would say, what is our definition of homelessness? And I think the strategic planning process, part of that process should be a conversation about who are we serving, who can we serve with federal funding under definitions of homelessness that the federal government understands, and who do we need to serve with other sources of resources.
So this question here is from somebody with the Shasta Support Service. The question is, how do we go about addressing the environmental impact of homelessness? Which wasn't one of the ones on our list of costs to the system because the font gets too small, but particularly for vetting, that's a big challenge. What we're looking at are some long-term solutions. Our report and our focus is not going to solve the challenge of homelessness tomorrow. It's going to be incremental and gradual improvement over a number of years. But the solutions that we're talking about, solving homelessness means solving the impacts of homelessness. It means solving the environmental effects that you're talking about. So this entire concept and this entire report, that's what the focus and the goals are. We've hit 7:45 and have an extraordinarily patient group of people here. We're going to stay after to continue talking because there's a lot of good questions. I wanted to get to all of them because they're all really excellent questions.
I think it's probably a good time for us to wrap up. I want to thank Nika and Eli for coming up, for Scott being here. And everybody who came. I really appreciate it. Remember that it's being filmed by Shasta County Arts Council will be reshown on Channel 81, and the schedules are in the back. Also, it'll be available on YouTube, and the reports are posted on the United Way website, and that information is also in the back of the room. And Felicia told me that we're going to be able to download the YouTube. Oh, please, and also if you could give our volunteers in the back, or I'll put them on the front back table in the foyer there, your questionnaires that you filled out. Really appreciate if you took the time to do that. That's very helpful. So again, people are going to be inside the room here to answer questions, get more engaged. If you're not on the email list, you can send me an email. My email's on everything that's out there. Please get in touch with me, and I would really enjoy seeing you again. We're going to keep this up. We're going to meet very often. We're going to meet probably monthly between now and the time that we're going to start working on the strategic plan, during the strategic planning process. Oh yes, Jenny is great. Jenny Espino's here from the Record Searchlight, and I can't believe how fast anybody can send out Twitter messages, as she's doing right now. And she does give the Record Searchlight. I have to say, the Record Searchlight has really been, in the last 10 months, I think, outstanding and shining a light on a really important issue. First, for example, on mental health, they're going to run their third installment, which is mental health and homelessness, and also the great reporting that they've done about homelessness, and really helping our community understand that we need to get involved and we need to make a difference. It's all of us working together is what's going to make a difference. So thanks, and this is the card on January 28th is our next scheduled forum, even though we will probably be doing other things in between then, is at the Methodist Church on the respectful conversations about homelessness. It's really the faces of homelessness. And especially want to thank Derek. I did meet Derek and Bryce on my way to Santa Rosa. They're amazing young men. I really appreciate that Derek came here to talk with us tonight. He's actually who I engaged and had him volunteer to help me post the reports on the United Way website, and help me with some very technical things that I was not skilled in. So I want to thank Derek, and I wish him all the best. So, thanks again. Please stay after if you'd like. We're here to answer questions.